For that, Sandra. Why don't you say that with me? God is my strength. Bring your hands to your heart. God is my strength. Now take a deep breath. God is my strength. All right, well, we're done. Have a great 2025. All right, so for those of you who may not know, especially if you're new to the community, today we have a special service. It's our White Stone ceremony and anointing. And so it's part of how we kick off the year. The service is going to look a little different because of it than it normally does. If you're new, you won't notice it, so just enjoy it, right? For the service itself, just want to make sure that everybody received on their way in, or that at least that you have it with you now, a white stone and a pencil. And if you brought your letters to God that many of us wrote this past week, especially after the burning bowl, if you brought it with you and you don't have an envelope, we want to make sure that you get an envelope so that you can self-address it. So that we can then send you that letter once we receive it today as part of the ceremony. So if you don't have a white stone or if you don't have an envelope, will you raise your hand so that our welcome team and our ushers can get it to you, and just keep them up. And I'm going to tell you a joke anyway, so this is an opportunity for you to just pretend that you're howling so loudly because of how good the joke was. So just keep your hands raised, okay? Oh, no. Only if you don't have those items. But I appreciate the energy that you're bringing to my joke. So, 4 men were at a hospital waiting room because their wives were about to have babies. And a nurse goes up to the first one and says, "Congratulations, you are the father of twins." And the father says, "Well, that's odd. I actually work for the Minnesota Twins." And so then everybody was, excited and happy. The nurse comes back in and says to one of the other men, "Congratulations, you are the father of triplets." And that gentleman says, "Well, that's pretty amazing. Actually, that's pretty odd because I actually work for the 3M company." And so then the nurse comes back in and says, "Congratulations," to another guy that was there. He says, "You are the father of quadruplets." The guy says, "That is really odd because I work for the 4 Seasons." Then the last father that was in the waiting room starts to just bang his head on the wall. And the other father's like, "What's going on? What's this about?" He goes, "Oh my gosh, I work for 7-Up." All right. I wanted to kick it off well for the new year. And I always connect it with what I'm about to say, or I try to. Whether the joke works or not, I try to work it in. How about that? And the question is, how many dreams are you willing to birth this new year? What new realities for yourself are you willing to experience in this new year? And how many different ways are you open and receptive to experiencing God? See, today, and I imagine this year, one of the things that I invite us into, and I'm inviting myself into, is to not limit God. To not limit God, not limit who we are in the presence of the divine, and not limit who we get to be and how we get to be out in the world when we trust that God's strength is our strength, that we can lean on the very presence of God, that we can lean on that Christ nature that we are. And so this year and this time together is really about setting an intention for what we want to experience and who we get to be in this new year. And I have to tell you that regardless of what dreams and aspirations we are looking to birth as part of our new reality this year, I believe that it's all through the power of faith. For we are told that faith alone, through faith alone, we can do great things. And we can do the great things that are already implanted within our own hearts to do. It's an opportunity to really have a vision for ourselves that is anchored in the faith that God's good is our good, in the faith that God's presence is always within us and always active in our lives as grace itself. And I was reading this article during the holiday break, and as soon as I read this line, I was just like, it hit me. And I wanted to share it with you about faith. It says, faith is nothing more but how much this is than emotion of the soul towards God, to be able to realign ourselves, refocus, and bring our awareness into the very presence of God. And as we have, gone through this whole holiday season and really allowed that, or celebrated the Christ essence that we are, and as some of us are moving into tomorrow, how many of you know what tomorrow is besides Monday, January 6th? Three Kings Day. Some people have been in Miami long enough to know that. Yes. So tomorrow is Three Kings Day. And just like the three kings followed that star that guided them to the place of the Christ, to the place of miracles, we ourselves are always being guided. And the opportunity for us today, as we move into this white stone ceremony, is to seek out within our own selves, what is our North Star? What is it that will remind us, regardless of what is taking place in our lives, regardless of what may show up in this new year, that reminds us to focus our attention and center ourselves in God, to bring everything that we are to recognizing the very presence of God in our midst. And so many of us, especially I think if you're in the room today, have awakened to an understanding that the presence of God is within us, that the presence of God is always around us, and it is our highest good, and it is intended so that we can live into our good. And while we have awakened to that truth, how many of us have moments of forgetting that? How many of us have those experiences where we know that we know that we know, but we're just going to put it to the side for now because I got to go through the emotions, I got to go through the human experience, and it's an opportunity right here and right now to, again, remember that in every experience, we can center ourselves on God, that we can center ourselves in the kingdom that is at hand, and we can center ourselves in knowing that we actually are the expressions of good and the good in the world, and that while we may forget sometimes, that doesn't change the potential. And the more that we remember or that we have tools to remind us of that divine potential and who we are and what we get to be in the world, the more grace-filled we'll experience life, the more ease and flow we will have with whatever it is that we may be moving through. And so it's a journey of really recognizing our oneness with God and the truth of our being. Paulo Coelho, the writer, says, maybe the journey isn't about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so that you can be who you came to be in the first place. I believe that we came to be expressions of good, expressions of God, that we came to be here so that we can experience our oneness. And along the way, maybe even with some things that took place in 2024, we add on top of all of that truth of who we are, judgments about ourselves, feelings of unworthiness, hurts, right? Resentments, whatever it may be, anything that has kept us from fully acknowledging the truth of our being and that Christ nature that we are. And so this is where the white stone ceremony comes into play, because this is our opportunity to have a tool for ourselves, remind ourselves, get that North Star, that whatever is going on in our lives, that we can look to it and be reminded, oh, wait, this is my anchor. This is how I recenter myself in any experience to experience it as an experience of God. Because no matter what we are moving through, we always have a choice. Are we going to look at it from the sense of faith, or are we looking at it from the sense of fear? Are we looking at it from the place of love and divine love, or from the place of separation, of a place of not being good enough to a place of really remembering, wait a minute, God is all there is. God is all there is, and I get to experience it. I get to live into that. Now, this ceremony is inspired by the book of Revelation, a book that we don't talk about very often in Unity, because it's a doozy, by the way. How many of you remember reading the book of Revelation? A few. Okay. We've been spared. No. It's actually a really interesting book when you look at it metaphysically. So one thing I want you all to know is that in Unity, not everything that's in the Bible do we believe that it is historical. Not everything that's in the Bible we take for the word. But we know that everything in the Bible has a deepened meaning for us. When we understand it metaphysically, we can look underneath all that it is expressing to recognize a truth about ourselves, a truth about life, a truth about God. And so this is an opportunity for us to do that also. And everything in the Bible is a part of recognizing the journey that we take. And let me tell you, I don't know how you're feeling about it, but I gotta say, 2025 will be a journey. 2025 will be a journey, and we get to decide what kind of journey it's going to be. We get to decide how we will move through that journey. And so in the book of Revelations, there are 7 churches that are going through their own struggles and their own difficulties. Anybody experience any struggles or difficulties in 2024? Good. I'm seeing some heads shaking. I don't know if that's because you believe it or you don't believe it. But yeah, it's just part of sometimes the human journey and experience. And so just like these churches, we ourselves are being moved through different experiences, mainly so that we can get to know, I believe, to get to know ourselves more fully so that we can rely more on the strength that God is in our lives. And so this specific church that we're talking about today is the church of Pergamon. And it gets a reward because the scriptures say that right before they get their reward, they have been going through some struggles. They have been going through some challenges and issues, and they were all centered on the fact that they had a lot of false gods. They idolized a lot of things that were keeping them from fully acknowledging the presence of God. They said that basically in the city of the church of Pergamon, that they overcame and renounced the fact that there were all these false gods, Satan as they call it. Metaphysically, we would see it as maybe the ego, right? Like the living out into our experience of life through a sense of the 5 senses, a sense of separation, a sense of old patterns and old beliefs. And it says, I know where you are living, says God. I know where you are living. So there's this understanding, hey, it can get challenging. I know where you are living, and I know that you have overcome. And so we live in a world that many times tells us that our value is in what we have, it is in what we possess, who we control, who we oppress. We live in a time where so many of the things that are coming at us are seeking to divide us, and to make us even feel more separate from each other. And just like the church of Pergamon, we can choose differently. We can say no to that way of living or experiencing life through the ego sense and really come alive with the sense of our own divinity and be able to see through the eyes of love, be able to see through the eyes of wholeness. And so they awakened to a greater truth, just like we get invited to awaken moment by moment to a greater truth. Now, it also says, congratulations, you've awakened to a new way of being. Congratulations, you have awakened and renounced the world of the senses, and watch out, because things are creeping in. Watch out, because I'm seeing some things come about. How many of us have awakened to the truth of our being, and yet we find areas or spaces or situations where the old self, the old patterns, the old way of thinking about ourselves, the unworthiness starts to creep in. Yeah? Yeah, it happens, right? It's part of that human experience, which as I'm saying that, part of the human experience is also to choose God. Part of the human experience is to also be aware of the presence of God. So maybe there's something for me to look at there, right? To no longer just say, when I'm in fear, when I'm in the places of unworthiness, when I'm places of being judgmental, oh, it's just a human experience. No, the human experience also includes love, includes faith, includes peace. And God says, you've done so well by overcoming that false sense. And while things are creeping in, I'm going to give you something so that you can continually come back to center, so that you can continually come back to truth. And it says in Revelation chapter 2, verse 17, let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. To everyone who conquers, I will give you some hidden manna, and I will give you a white stone. And on the white stone is written a new name. Now, first it says, let anyone who has ears listen to what the Spirit is saying. To me, it's a reminder that at all times, we can open ourselves up to listening to that still small voice, right? That thing within us that knows that we know that we know God is at hand, that all will be well, that if we are faithful to the truth that is within us, to the truth that is really within humanity, regardless of how we may be seeing it, that we will be receiving that hidden manna, that we will be rewarded. And that reward really comes from a greater sense of peace. How many of you, just even sometimes just you experience a little bit of ease, a little bit of like just the flow, and you look back and you're like, oh my God, that was such a big gift, right? Like just to be able to move through a day, right? An experience with peace, you're like, that was amazing. That was a reward. That was all that I needed to be able to experience more of God's good in this situation itself. And so this morning, during our meditation, we're going to listen to that still small voice. We're going to ask ourselves, what is that one star, that North Star, that thing, that quality that we want to not only live into, but that we will center ourselves in to remind us to be faithful to the very God of our being. And so in this way, no matter what comes up, we can conquer the fear. We can overcome the separation. We can let go and choose spirit over ego. That is how we conquer life. That is how we, even the word conquer, that is how we get to live life to its fullest. And we must first seek the kingdom. Jesus told us, first seek the kingdom. Now, that doesn't mean that all of us have to quit our jobs, that we all have to go up a mountain and go into a monastery and pray for the rest of our lives. Thank God. And to me, what it means is that in every situation, we seek first the choice that brings us closer to the truth. We seek first to live into love, to live first into peace, and to be the vessels by which those things come into the world in greater ways. And so when we seek first the kingdom, when we seek first to be aware of the presence of God in all things, we're promised a few things. And the first thing that God promises us through this chapter in Revelations is that we are given hidden manna. And manna is basically food and nourishment from heaven. And so we're getting an entirely new source of energy and nourishment. When we choose God, we will be activated to be able to experience life through the eyes, through the heart, through the sense of God in our midst. We will be revitalized. We will be re-energized to experience that which is for us to experience from a new way of looking at it. And we're given that peace that passes all understanding. We are given that love that heals all. We are given that joy that enlightens our path. It is nourishment from heaven. And so by its very definition, which I am personally defining for us right now, this is my definition, but nourishment from heaven, to me, it surpasses everything. And so it's not only nourishment for our soul, it is nourishment for our bodies. It is how we are able to live a healthier experience and a healthier year in all sense of the word. John chapter 4, verse 32, and Jesus alludes to this. He says that he came because he has food to eat that we do not know yet about. But the opportunity to know it more fully is right here, right now, and in 2025. The second promise is that everybody gets a white stone. And the white stone, this is an ancient ritual. In the times when this was written, if you went to prison because you did something, or you were in some sort of bondage and you gained your freedom, you paid your dues, you were given a white stone so that if anybody questioned you, you could just show up and be like, paid my dues, did my time, I'm a new me, I'm good to go, right? And so we are receiving this white stone as a symbol that we're done being in bondage to the ego. We're done being imprisoned by false ideas of who we are, of what life is about, of thinking that we're separate from the very presence and essence of God. Don't you think that we've paid enough based on that sense of separation? Don't you think you've paid your dues enough by trying to live it small rather than live into the bigness of God's idea of who you are? How many of you are just simply done with playing it small? How many of you are just done with having to pay for the sins or the mistakes, I would just call them, of the past? Yeah. How many of you are done in being in bondage to an old way of being, an old pattern, an old decision, an old version of your relationship with God? So this is our reward when we say, no longer will I live in the ways that I was imprisoned. I today claim my freedom, and that freedom is always in God. Emily Cady says, do not be under bondage to false beliefs about your circumstances or environment. God is in everything that happens to you. Now, it may not always feel that way, but guess what? You have your North Star to remind you what you are choosing to lean on. Are you choosing to lean on the false self, the false beliefs, or are you choosing to lean on God's love and strength? We've paid our dues. If you didn't think you've paid your dues, let me tell you right now, you've paid your dues. No longer do you have to pay the interest on that. Like, you could be done with it right here and right now. And so, by the way, this white stone, it's actually a natural stone that was quarried near Bethlehem in Israel. So it is here for us as a very symbolic way of connecting us to the ancient and to the newness that is at hand. The third promise is a name. Now, around the same time that Revelations was written, the name was a very sacred thing. I've shared with you before. When I named my son, I looked up like specific qualities of the names. How many of you know what your name means? What the ancient definition of your name? I would love to know it. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but Juan is gift from God. Just saying it. Just saying it out loud. No. And it's something that I get to live into. Because as I remember that, I'm like, I can ask myself, wait a minute, am I being a gift in this situation or not? Am I being a gift in the ways that I show up in my life or not? Am I being a gift to the world around me and live into my name, or am I not? And the names in the Bible, there's many instances where a shift in consciousness created a new name. A new awakening within us created a new sense of self. And so we have the story, for example, of Abram, who, when he went deeper into his faith, became Abraham, that means father of many. Sarai, who, the definition of Sarai was quarrelsome, to Sarah, when she had her awakening, which means princess. Saul to Paul, Paul means humble, and this is my favorite one that I found last year. Simon, Peter, right? Simon became Peter. Simon is defined as listening to God. And so I see when Jesus first found Simon, he was there to just take it all in. And as he continued to unfold and go into the truth of his being, he became known as Peter, which means rock. And so he listened, he awakened, and he became the anchor for faith for so many. And so, are you willing to be changed? Are you willing to have a new you show up and recognizing that that new you is really that you that has always been, that was always intended for you to live into? When we embody something more fully, that is how we are known. And so I mentioned this last year, but you know, what a beautiful thing when you get your word. Could you imagine if you embodied it and lived it so fully that no longer would somebody say, oh, there's Juan going down the street, but my word last year was grace. How much would I have loved for people to be like, there's grace incarnate. There is grace being lived and embodied. And the same thing can happen for us. This is a reminder of what we come here to embody this year, to become even more aware of the presence of God, and to be known as. Now, in order for us to birth our dreams, our intentions for 2025, we must claim them and we must be reminded of our truth. How shall each of you be known? What is it that is already alive in you, that is seeking to be expressed, embodied, and lived into by you? It is already within your hearts, yearning to be known and yearning to be lived. This is a new beginning, and it's a new you. It's the new you that, quite frankly, is amazing, is exactly what the world in this very moment needs, and it is exactly the right time to be birthing it, so that not only can we live heaven on earth, but we can invite others to live heaven on earth with us. And so we're going to prepare for a meditation shortly with our meditation song. And with that, we're going to then invite you to, during the meditation, write the word that comes up for you to be your North Star. We'll invite you to come up at the end of the meditation for an anointing. By the way, it's a beautiful symbolic gesture that we're doing because the anointing happens within you. It is nobody doing it other than the very presence of God that is within you. And it's a way of just solidifying for yourself, this is the word, this is how I'm centered in God. I'm also going to invite you, if you brought your letters to God, to bring them up so that we can bless them, and we'll keep them here so that we can mail it out to you later on. It's okay if you don't have your letter to God done on the way out. You can pick one of them up and you can bring it in other services, and we'll do the same. But that's sort of what we're going to go through now. And to lead us into our meditation song, I just want to leave you with this prayer from John O'Donohue about the new beginning that we are embarking on. It says, "In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched you desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside of you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with seduction of safety and the great promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled, and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opened before you. Through your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this happening. Unfurl yourself in the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure, hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you." We are open here and now to the world that awaits us, and it is the internal world of God. And so it is.